my honor to give us a short introduction to Eric, the speaker of the talk today. Eric was my student many years ago. Time flies, and he's already currently a faculty member teaching at Hokkaido University. And he was one of the very few students that always give you the pleasure of reading. When it comes to reading your student's thesis or dissertation, it's not always a pleasant experience to your advisors, right? And I always try to make myself a cup of coffee when I read my students' writings. And the more coffee that I drink, the more that I enjoy their writing. Usually I end up drinking a lot of coffee after reading Eric's writing. And he always had this kind of creativity that I want to see in the student writing. Of course, dissertation is a platform to communicate with your readers. And it's one of the things that makes dissertation or academic writing challenging is that, of course, you want to share the information, but at the same time, you want your readers to enjoy this process, this communication process. So I think Eric is and has been a very successful writer in that regard. So I specifically told Eric that he's going to actually to leave some time for the Q&A. And so while listening to his sharing, instead of seeing this as a talk, I would also invite you to think about your experience of interacting with your advisors or your professors, or think about those frustrating moments. Why you think that, especially when you think that you try to get your ideas across, right? And why your advisors are not getting it, or why your readers are not getting it. And also think about the questions that you have as you listen to Eric's sharing. And I strongly encourage you to have raise your question and interact with Eric at the end of the talk today. All right. So without further delay, let's welcome Eric. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Tony. I'm really honored to be here. I did my PhD here, so, yeah, obviously. So I'm really happy to be back. And this is the first time I've been back since COVID. I did my PhD defense with masks on, and that was like the first time that we were like, oh, should we wear masks? So, we weren't really sure yet. It wasn't common, and it was such a weird experience. Okay, so I'm curious. I want to know what kind of students you are. So, who's an undergrad student? Okay, and then who's like doing their master's, maybe? Okay, PhD? Okay, some, okay. Okay, very wide range. So, okay, so right now I am teaching at Hokkaido University, which is, there I teach fresh, like undergraduate Japanese students, but also there's some study abroad students that come. So there's actually quite a wide range of students. So I want to start with a warm-up, and you're going to stand up a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to show you some statements or some beliefs about academic writing. And if you agree with it, you can move this to this side. If you disagree with it, you can move to that side. And if you're just not sure, then you can stay in the middle, okay? So I think for me, in college, I did academic writing, but also I was an English literature major, so I also did creative writing. So for me, there was a comparison, an opposite of being creative and being academic. For me, I was, in college, I was constantly comparing the two and trying to figure out, well, how do I be creative and write poetry or stories? And then how do I be academic and write essays? And sometimes those two can overlap, right? They're not always completely separate. But maybe for many of you, the only kind of writing you're doing here in college is academic writing, sort of by default. So maybe it's not necessarily a thing that you consciously think about all the time. Today, I want to try to give some new perspectives. Maybe it's new for you, maybe not, but just I'm hoping that it'll help you approach academic writing in new ways, and also maybe provide some resources. So this will be the more practical part. Okay. So what are we talking about when we're talking about academic writing? Well, it can be actually really complicated, right? Academic writing is not just one thing. I think of it kind of like cooking, where there's all sorts of different kinds of cooking. You know, you do it for different purposes in different contexts, different levels of cooking, right? Same thing with academic writing, and you know, you guys are on different parts of, you know, the academic journey. So, and academic writing is also something that keeps changing over time. It hasn't always been the same, and especially with social media and the internet, it keeps changing. So it's not always the same thing. And so just an example of like the wide range of, you know, what we might consider academic writing. I think usually we're introduced to academic writing from classroom essays, but you might also be doing laboratory reports. If you become an academic, you might be doing research. So you might be doing grant proposals, journal papers, and maybe even write books. So all of that can be academic writing, which makes this presentation really hard because I wasn't exactly sure what to cover. I just want to sort of briefly talk about my journey in academic writing. I went to high school and college and graduate school in America. And in high school, I was so focused on getting good grades and so focused on getting a good test score for the SATs. And I just thought about writing as following a bunch of rules. And as long as I followed all of these rules, you know, the thesis needs to be at the end of the first paragraph. Each paragraph needs to have this. As long as I followed all the rules, I could get a good grade. But I actually didn't get a very good grade on writing. And later in college, I sort of realized that writing is supposed to be a way for you to express yourself, right? You're supposed to be a way that you say what you want to say. And I realized, like, oh, in this essay, I just need to write what I want to say, but write it in a, you know, a fancy way, a formal way, okay? But I think in both of these were really about handing a paper to the teacher and having the teacher read it. I think when I started graduate school, like my master's and PhD, I realized, like, oh, my writing is going to be a reflection of me. Like when I send a paper out to a journal, like they're gonna read this and they're gonna be, oh, this is Eric's writing. This is as a teacher, as a professor. And you feel a pressure because your writing is the way that you connect to the academic community. And it's the way that you show your professionalism. So writing becomes more than just something in the classroom. It's about establishing, you know, your career. And later on, if you guys become professors, it's even scarier because no one tells you what to do. You have to do everything. You have to do it on your own. So you say, this year, what am I going to write? How many papers am I going to write? Where am I going to send it to? Nobody's going to tell you. And you're like, oh, I have to figure this out. And not just writing, but how do you use your writing skills to further your career? So that's the, you know, sort of the journey. And I expect there's just going to be more, you know, after this. I don't know, not necessarily know what, but I don't really think there's an end. Okay. So I want to start with the whole idea of rules. being really focused on rules. I think when students take an academic writing class, they're kind of worried about following the rules, and then teachers also teach a lot of rules. So I want you to think of at least 2 rules that you've been taught about academic writing. And maybe find a partner around you and then tell them, what are 2 rules that you remember, that you know right now about academic writing? Okay, go ahead. Find a partner.
Sometimes. Yeah. I was told that there must always be a conclusion at the end of every paragraph. Sure. So the first sentence always say what your point is, and then at the end you must.
So might be okay with it? Yeah, I would say like anything with the word count.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Right. Like your abstract, whatever.
I think the biggest difference is as a student, word doesn't sit with yourself to students. They only have how many pages.
That our conclusions should always be taking the
They seem to
side
be
and not be
one.
on the fence.
But then,
Because I remember when I was writing essays, they would always say like discuss or argue whether X is true, and then you have start with paragraphs, and at the end the conclusion. Because I'm from psychology and there's never a right or wrong, so we like to stand the moment once, and we are taught not to that we have to misunderstand.
Start repeating themselves when they try to hit the word. Right. Oh, I still need 200 words. I might as well repeat myself.
but how do you help me? Yeah, people who have
Yeah, they gotta find
Okay.
something new to talk about.
Okay.
A new issue or a new direction.
So can I ask someone to share a rule that you've discussed? Okay.
It's about the first we talk about introduction,
Yeah.
and the second we will talk about what we studied,
Yeah.
and last we have a reference. I think this is a kind of rule we should follow.
Yeah. Okay. The structure,
Yes.
intro, the study, and then references. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Anyone else? One more person? Okay.
So it's very similar, but it's academic writing, right? So it can't go too far off. It's very similar to what she said, but it's for each paragraph. We always start with the first sentence saying what our argument is, and then we elaborate what it is. We give our argument, we give examples, and then we have to end the paragraph with the last sentence stating what the conclusion is based on all the facts that we have stated.
Okay, yeah. The structure of a paragraph. Yes. Okay. Good. I'm really glad that you guys mentioned those 2 actually. So the rules are difficult because, yes, they exist, you're right, and I agree with both of what you've said, right? But also they're kind of flexible, and the more academic writing you do, the more you're like, wait, I thought that wasn't allowed, but okay, I guess it's okay sometimes, or if that person does it, it's okay. So you experience a lot of like, okay, so I guess there are rules, and they're helpful because I follow the rules, but sometimes they can be flexible. Okay, so there's so many rules, so many rules. And some teachers are strict about the students following the rules, but some aren't. And some teachers teach a lot of rules, but then some don't, and just let you write more freely. So it can all be very confusing. And sometimes different teachers will teach different rules. As a teacher, I get that a lot. They're like, well, my other teachers said, don't do this or do this. And it's just kind of confusing, right? So what should you do? How should you approach all of these rules? that we have in academic writing. Okay, so this is kind of cheesy and corny, okay, but I'm gonna call it the subway method, okay? But basically, I think like when it comes to rules, like when we're talking about subway standard, you have to have the bread and then you have the stuff in it, right? But there's flexibility. You can choose what you put in it, right? You can choose what kind of bread. So the idea is you need to know the structure, the basic, very basic. You start, okay. You need to start and you need to learn and know the basic structure, right? That a sandwich needs some kind of bread, something in it. It's between two pieces of bread. And then later, when it comes to the specifics, you can adjust it based on what class you're in. You know, if you're an undergrad in your graduate school, the specifics will change. Different journals might want different things. Different disciplines will ask for different things. All of those specifics, you can adjust, okay? So you need to, I think sometimes you need to know what are the rules that are fixed and what are the rules that are flexible. Okay, and I'm gonna show you some examples, some real examples, not Subway. Okay, so we all know the intro, body, conclusion structure, right? I think we've all been taught that you need an introduction, there's a thesis statement, body paragraphs, and then the conclusion, right? Okay, and this is what I would consider the basic structure, right? That you should know. Because the specifics will change. So for example, this structure applies to many forms of academic writing, but not necessarily all. So if you're writing a journal article, they use pretty much the same structure. They have the intro, this would be the body, and then this is the conclusion, okay? So, this is more like an essay that you might write for a class. And then this is an essay you would write if you want to get published, your research published in a journal. But once you're familiar with this basic structure, you can customize and adjust the specifics when you get here. This essay is probably, the typical 5-paragraph essay is only a few pages long, 1, 2, 3 pages. A journal article can be up to 20 pages, maybe. So again, you're going to have to adjust. Well, you know the basic structure, but you adjust the specifics. Okay? I think that's a skill that is very important in academic writing. I'm just using organization and structure as an example, but I think this applies with a lot of other rules too. Okay. Here's another example. So we have the original intro, body, conclusion. I recently published a book that is from my PhD dissertation here. And this also has the intro, body, conclusion structure, but with this time it's with many chapters, hundreds of pages. So over hundreds of pages, I did have an intro, I have the body, and then also had a conclusion. So in some ways, in academic writing, it can be quite consistent, and that makes it kind of easy, right? Once you're familiar and comfortable with this, you can sort of transition into this longer forms quite easily. Okay. So something I want to talk about is for resources. There are a lot of resources for academic writing out there. Academic writing classes are great, but I think when you get to college and then graduate school, you have to figure a lot of stuff out on your own. which is also very hard. So I wanna show you a resource that I've used in my class, and I think it's a great resource. Okay, so it's a book. Okay, it's like a textbook, but you can. The book is designed for self-study. The author wants students to use it as a self-guide. But the book is specifically for writing a journal paper, especially in the sciences, like biology or chemistry or engineering. Okay, so if you're not in the sciences, the book will seem a little bit, it seems a little distant, okay? But, okay, and I think the book is mostly for graduate students because they're talking about writing journal papers. And one thing I think that's great about the book is that I think they cater it to both native and non-native speakers. So they do have some grammar and vocabulary in it. But I think the content is useful for both. Now, I say that it's very specific, and maybe some of you aren't in the sciences, or maybe some of you aren't going to write journal papers yet. But they teach a strategy. The main strategy of the book is I think, useful for anyone. So I'm going to show you the main strategy of the book. Okay, so the idea in the book is that academic writing is not one thing. Different academic disciplines have different ways of writing journal papers. So someone from art history writes differently from English literature and writes differently from TESOL and writes differently from chemistry. So how do you know how you're supposed to write for your discipline, your subject? So in the book, they teach this idea of reverse engineering. Reverse engineering is you're going to analyze academic writing sentence by sentence, and you create your own models for how to write papers. Okay, I'll show you some examples. So here I'm using, this is just a sample paragraph that I found online. This is supposed to be my example of like a college paper, something that's like a college essay maybe. And it's an introduction paragraph, okay? So you can see what I've done is I've broken down the paragraph into sentence by sentence. And what you're supposed to do is analyze what does each sentence do? What's the function of each sentence? So the first sentence, climate change caused by humans is having a drastic effect on the world. Okay, so it's introducing this idea of climate change to us. The second sentence, however, the damage is not only affecting glaciers and rivers, okay, and I think it's broadening even more beyond glaciers and rivers. Temperatures are starting to noticeably shift, and cities and neighborhoods that have been otherwise consistent for centuries, okay. So talking also about temperatures. Addressing the issue may require challenging decisions by individuals who have grown comfortable with their lifestyles and may be unaware of how their choices contribute to climate change. So in sentence 4, they're starting to focus in on the topic, which is these individuals who have grown comfortable with their lifestyles and are unaware. Okay. And in sentence 5, that's the main argument, is that while it has long been convenient to ignore how small changes may have a positive effect on slowing climate change, it is vital to consider the extent to which measures such as eliminating single-use plastics truly provide meaningful help. Okay, so we see here they're talking about how individuals' small changes can have positive effects. Okay, so we're analyzing the function of each sentence, okay? Afterwards, okay, so this example is from like a college essay. In the book, they're focusing on like research journal papers. Okay, this is from the book. Okay, and so they're analyzing. It's quite complicated, especially I'm not in the. It's a part of from my biomedical field, but. So for example, in sentence 7, they say sentence 7 mentions a key research study in this area. Okay, they mention, for example, Penny et al. Showed, okay, Okay, so they're trying to mention a key research study. Okay, after we analyze each of the sentences, we get something like this. Sentence 1 establishes the importance of this topic. Sentence 2 provides background factual information for the reader, okay, etc., etc. After you've analyzed each sentence, then you can simplify it to a more generic model of how, so this is how the introduction can be written. Okay, so if I am a biomedical student, okay, my discipline is biomedics, I might look for a paper like this and say like, how did this researcher write the paper? You know, maybe I'm not that sure how the intro should be written. How did they write the intro, which here is 3 paragraphs. So I'm like, okay, so this is what they did with the intro. I'm not looking at the content, but I'm actually looking at the function. And from this intro, I can get a more general idea. So, okay, in the introduction of a biomedical journal paper, you first start with this, and then you go to this, and you do this, and then you do this. And this can be my model. Now, this might look different if we're looking at a psychology paper, or if we're looking at a philosophy paper. Right? So if I'm a philosophy student and I'm trying to write a journal paper, I'm not going to look at this. This is not going to be helpful. All of these rules are not helpful. I'm going to find a philosophy paper that is well respected, published in a respectable journal, and looks like something that I want to write. And I'm going to use that as my model. And then from that philosophy paper, I can create my own model for, how do I write an introduction in philosophy? Okay. So in the book that I posted, they talk about each section, intro, literature review. They go over each section in detail. But in general, this is the general strategy. And I think this is a very smart strategy. So when you're using this strategy, you really want to find, you need to find a few model papers. So these are papers, or basically examples, that are preferably published recently, published in well-respected journals, published in a journal that you're aiming to be published in, published by well-respected scholars, and maybe a published that you admire. Like, wow, I want to write like that someday. Okay? And then you use the reverse engineering approach to analyze it. So the benefits of doing this approach is that it's adaptive. Academic writing is changing. I think what I've read before is that it's getting shorter, especially in the sciences, because there's just so much to read nowadays, and people don't have the time to read all of the new research. So things are getting shorter and more concise. But by doing this with updated articles, you're getting, you're looking and analyzing how academic writing looks like now or currently. So you can use this as a self-study tool. It's flexible, meaning you can do it for different disciplines and different levels of writing. And I think it's not just something that, it doesn't just tell you the rules, like do this or don't do this, but you're actually learning a way to, you're trying to figure out on your own how to write the paper, which I think is actually very important. Okay. So in general, for me, then this is just from me now. So I'm somebody with, as a scholar, I have a lot of different interests, which is usually not recommended. I think, sometimes I've been told to just focus on one thing. For example, if I focus on, language testing, then everyone will say, like, oh yeah, that's the language testing guy. That's what I'm known for. Okay, but my interests are all over the place. So for example, for my PhD thesis from Sida, it was about teachers who've taught many languages and their identities. Okay, but I am also interested in like LGBTQ research, and those two things are very different, right? So if I want to write a paper about LGBTQ issues, how do I do that? So for me, this is my process of trying to figure out how to do that, how to teach myself how to do academic writing in different ways. When you want to write something that you've never written before, you really want to find, in my opinion, you want to find at least 3 examples. I call them model papers. You want a paper with the same kind of audience that you want. So something from the same journal that you want to publish in. Okay. You want to find a paper that's about the same topic that you're writing about, or maybe using the same theory, and you want to find a paper that is using the same methodology. Sometimes these will overlap, which is great, but sometimes they don't. Okay. So let me show you an example. Okay, never mind. I'm not sure where this slide went. Okay, oops. So my example was from a paper that I wrote while I was here at Sida during my PhD. And actually, so far, that's the paper that's been cited the most. So it's an LGBTQ paper. Again, it has nothing to do with language teaching, so it was kind of scary. But I found a paper that was also LGBTQ topic to see, how do people write about it? I found a paper from the same journal that I want to apply for, I want to submit to, like how do people in that journal write it, because it was sociolinguistics. And then I found another paper with the same kind of methodology I wanted to use. So all of those served as models to teach me, or models that I can learn from for how to do academic writing. I think if you're, whether you're a grad student or if you become a professor, if you want to keep growing and expanding, you need to learn how to, write. You need to learn how to learn new ways to write on your own, right? Because I think when you're a professor, there's no class you can take. Okay, yeah. Can we click here? Okay. So my experience so far has been there's no, I feel like I have to keep learning how to write in new ways. I have to keep learning and updating, my knowledge about academic writing. But I think it gets easier over time. And I think the more you do it, the more playful you become, because you're like, oh, I think there are rules, but there are actually a lot of things that are okay too. And when you look at the model paper, you'll see, you're like, wow, so this was published in a very good journal, but they did all these things that I thought I couldn't do. And you're like, oh, okay, so you can do them. Okay, so if you're interested, this is the book that I published, again, from my PhD here in Sida. I have a Facebook group that's about the topic, and sometimes I'll post things from there, like related to, especially related to multilingualism and teaching. So you can join that Facebook group. I also have an Instagram that is sort of like, I treat it as like my professional Instagram. It's about linguistic landscapes, which is another topic that I'm really interested in research. And so if you want to keep in touch, you can keep in touch that way. I think that's it. Okay, yeah.